Dream Travel is a 2.1 insane demon level created and published by Superior GD and verified by Guitar Hero Styles. It is the 20th travel level containing a massive amount of 296278 objects and is 7 minutes and 30 seconds long, 12 seconds short of the song that is used. The level starts calm and ranks up in difficulty over time. Low detail mode is available. It is the longest non-minigame Insane Demon. Also, some drawings are shown if low detail mode is not turned on. At 0 to 1%, a logo is shown. At 1 to 5%, an autumn/fall themed cube segment begins at half speed. Falling leaves and sunbeams layer over everything. At 5 to 7%, this part is a bowl segment at normal speed. It is a brown colored segment that is not too difficult except for some fake red orbs/switches that the player cannot click or they will die. At 8 to 11 at 8 to 10%, the next part starts with a UFO at 1x speed. After a couple of gravity portals, it then transitions into a rocket ship sequence with a few gravity switches again. After this is a simple spider transition and the next part begins. At 10 to 14%, a background scene of a city is shown for about 3 seconds, and then the first drop of the song begins. The beginning of the drop is at 2x speed and includes a short UFO section with 4 consecutive gravity portals, which is then followed by a short cube section with some orbs. After a small ball section, it then transitions into a tight wave segment, which can be a little tricky without practice. Finally, the player transitions into a very short dual spider area where they are required to click/tap at least 5 times or else they will not be able to pass the section. At 14 to 17%, this part begins with a somewhat difficult mini-cube section where the player has to hit a few switches and spheres along the way. Then it transitions into a ball segment that consists of a little bit of memorization, where the player will have to collect 2 flasks in order to trigger 2 platforms required to land on. Next is a rocket ship segment that starts with the player having to hit a switch to open an area to pass through. Then 2 more gravity portals with some flying follow after. At 17 to 21%, this section starts with a city-themed background as a normal speed robot where the player has to jump and hit a switch, followed by 2 very small jumps. A rocket ship segment, a couple more semi-tricky jumps appear before the player transitions into a 3x speed rocket ship segment in which they have to fly up through a moderately tight corridor and then down where there is a red sphere that must be clicked in order for the saw blade to go away. After hitting the red sphere, the player transitions into a spider section where there are a couple of orbs and a switch the player is required to hit, followed by a couple of tight spider jumps. At 21 to 25%, the player then gets thrown into a difficult transition into a ball part. It is still 3x speed, where the player needs to tap relatively fast in order to hit all of the spheres and pass the spikes in time. Though the player must be careful because some of the spheres and jumps have timings to them, so the player cannot hit them early. After a series of pink spheres, the player then transitions into a difficult wave with somewhat tight corridors at 3x speed. Towards the end of the section are a pair of dash orbs in a dual wave that the player needs to hit with precision, or else they will not hit the orbs and ultimately die from the 2 gears that needed to be triggered off by the orbs. The first pair of dash orbs is followed by another pair of dash orbs, after which the player goes back into a normal wave for a short segment where they ultimately hit a dash orb to transition to the next part. At 25 to 33%, the player then gets a break. This part consists of basically 4 segments, all of which include a short cube at normal speed and end with a dash orb that needs to be hit. When the dash orb is hit and held, an animation is played that imitates the player's cube with the dash orb trail. This animation is played for every dash orb, except for the 4th and final one, in which the player can actually see their cube. After the 4th one is hit, the player then goes into an auto cube section that syncs to the music. Then the second drop of the song begins. At 33 to 37%, the player then enters the first extended dual section of the level, which is at 3x speed. It is also symmetrical. It begins with a dual cube featuring some easy jumps and spheres, with not much timing involved. After a few of these jumps comes a somewhat tricky section with a total of 6 dash orbs. The first pair of dash orbs need to be hit a tiny bit late, but not too late, and be released very quickly. The next 4 orbs can be hit early, but both pairs of dash orbs need to be held longer than the first pair was. After this is a short dual ball in which the player needs to jump early for the first jump and late for the second jump. Then hit 2 yellow spheres to transition into an easy dual flying section. After this the duel ends, and the part finishes with a spider section featuring some easy timings. At 37 to 43%, next is a quick transition into a mini cube that the player must be prepared for. All that the mini cube includes is a couple of quick orbs and jumps that need to be buffered, or else the player will end up dying, since it is still at 3x speed. In this section, and through some other parts of the level, are animations of Juniper's, Dorami's, Nexus's, and Eric Van Wilderman's icons. After this, the player quickly transitions into a spider section with 3 easy but fast clicks, and then a green orb. After this is a dual spider spam where the player must click at least 15 times to pass, similar to the 14% spam, but much more difficult. This short section is followed by a couple of simple clicks and orbs. After a few of these clicks comes a dash orb that the player must hit and hold for a long period of time, precisely around 7 seconds, which transitions them into the next segment. At 44 to 47%, the player then goes into a 1x speed ball section consisting of only slopes, and every orb is a switch that is colored the same color as the orb they represent. The goal of the section is to collect 8 red skulls in order to pass. If the player does not end up doing so, they will be greeted with a monster at the end of the section with the letter F. Since the orbs in the section are replaced with switches, sometimes the player will have to hit the switch instead of the actual orb. Because of this, there are timings required for some of the orbs which therefore makes this section harder. There is also sometimes luck involved with this section. At 48 to 52%, note from here until 61%, the level is at half speed. The player enters a half-speed mini-cube with yellow glowing objects and platforms, very similar to a specific section in the 6-minute-long Hard Demon Dart Travel. It is a very calm and chill part, with just a few simple jumps. After this section ends, the player is thrown into yet another questionable transition into a rocket ship segment. The player must immediately fly up after entering the portal, but after that, it is just simple rocket ship navigating. At 52 to 55%, the player then enters a robot section with a sign that says halfway point. The background consists of an art piece of a man sitting in a field looking at a city. At the end of the section, the year 2020 pops up in the sky. As for the gameplay of the robot, it is just some simple jumps with a few sphere timings. After a normal-sized robot section, the player transitions into a mini robot with a few tricky small jumps. At 56 to 61%, the player transitions into another rocket ship segment. They must wait and not touch anything until the yellow sphere, which they must click in order to deactivate a barrier. This flying section is somewhat tight, but not too difficult with practice. There is another sphere that is required to deactivate another barrier, this time a red sphere, and then some more flying. After this is a short ball section that is very easy, with easy jumps and sphere timings. After the player hits a dash orb, they transition into a gray rocket ship section with a little bit of straight flying, but nothing too difficult. There are a few gravity portals throughout the section. At 61 to 67%, the next section begins with a normal speed mini robot with some tricky timings. There are some tiny jumps that the player needs to do, mixed in with medium-sized jumps, etc., making this section probably more nerve-wracking and difficult than the previous sections. After a bit of robot gameplay, the player transitions into a normal-sized cube and falls on a series of platforms that sync to the music. At the end of the platform, they have to hit a dash orb that brings them to the next segment at 3x speed. At 68 to 74%, this part begins with a rocket ship at 3x speed. The player only needs to tap once or twice after entering the final blue gravity portal. Then is a very short ball segment with a few orbs, followed by a UFO where there are arrows to tell the player where to jump, including a red orb. After that is a straightforward flying section, where the player is required to hit a dash orb to deactivate a wall blocking the path. After the dash orb is 2 gravity portals and some easy flying sections. Then it is a robot with quite easy and simple jumps, including a dash orb and a yellow orb. Following this is a very short, somewhat tight mini spider section, which is then followed by a mini robot segment starting with a dash orb and has a few easy jumps and orbs. To end the section, there is a cube portal that transitions the player into the third and final drop. At 75 to 78%, this whole section is a dual segment. It starts with a ball cube part where the player must jump a little late as the cube and hit the 3 spheres given, and then jump and hit the pink sphere as the cube. After that, the cube changes into a robot where the player must do a full jump to land on the top platform and do 3 consecutive small jumps. After this, the ball changes into a cube and the player must do an almost full jump as the robot. Doing a complete jump makes the next jump more difficult. And then tap once to hit the red sphere / do a small jump as the robot. After the player hits a yellow sphere as the robot, they will enter a straight fly / ball spam section. The player has to wait until they are off of the platform as the rocket ship. Wait a split second, then start spamming fast, but in controls so that the player does not die while straight flying. After this is a series of jumps and spheres that are mostly straightforward. After this is a dual cube, still asymmetrical. A good way of doing this part is tapping and holding every time the player hits a sphere so that the cube on top jumps at the right time while the cube on the bottom also hits the spheres early enough. After jumping once, the player then enters the symmetrical dual section. At 78 to 82%, the symmetrical dual At 78 to 82%, the symmetrical dual is easier than the asymmetrical dual section. To start it off is a dual robot where the player has to do 3 as small as possible jumps in a row, followed by a pair of yellow spheres. After this is a dual wave, where the player simply has to do 3 somewhat small taps to go over 3 pairs of small spikes. Then a UFO section, which the player can do a couple of different ways. The most popular way to do this section seems to be to tap as soon as the player exits each gravity portal. There are 5 gravity portals in the middle of the crater. And then there is a dash orb that needs to be hit. After this is a dual ball section, where the player should click where the arrows are, as they are very useful. For example, clicking too early before the arrows may result in the player getting killed by the saw blade between the 2 dual icons, or getting killed in the back end of the pair of spikes ahead of them. After this is a yellow sphere, followed by a pair of black spheres, followed by another pair of black spheres, and then a pink sphere. It is recommended that the player hits all these spheres as early as possible, as to not get killed by the saw blades. After this is a few more simple jumps and then a short dual rocket ship segment, then the duel ends. At 82 to 86%, this part begins with a short mini cube break, which consists of a few jumps and orbs and a gravity portal. Then the boss fight starts. To start it off is a rocket ship in which the player has to fly up, then down as reversed, and stay down as a normal gravity rocket ship until the player reaches a red sphere, which needs to be clicked or hit. Then is a short UFO where it is suggested that the player first jumps a little late and then then jump as soon as the player enters the gravity portals, 2 of them. After is a short ball segment where the player needs to jump as soon as they land, or the boss attacks will kill them. After the player hits a yellow sphere as soon as possible again, they transition into a rocket ship where they have to hit a switch and simply fly between the boss's layers. The boss's lasers. At 86 to 92%, after this, the player at 86 to 92%, the player gets thrown as a cube into a wave section where they do the same thing as in the rocket ship segment. Stay between the boss's lasers, while also having to dodge some attacks. After this, the player enters a spider portal where it is necessary to buffer 3 spheres, black, blue, and blue, so that the player does not get killed by the boss's attacks. Then is a UFO section where it is once again necessary to hit a switch, then jump into various gravity portals. It is recommended that the player jumps before the arrows tell them to jump, because if they jump too late, they will inevitably die because of the flames the boss throws at them. Then the player is thrown into a short rocket ship section where they once again hit a switch, then fly down to hit a red sphere and straight fly into a cube portal. When the player enters the cube portal, a short, easy mini cube begins where the player has to jump once and hit a blue sphere a little late. Then jump and hit a few more spheres that lead to a dash orb that the player needs to hold for a while, 7 seconds again. Then it is a short auto section. At 93 to 100%, the player gets boosted up into a half-speed rocket ship segment, which consists of some easy flying and rocket ship control. However, it is right at the end of the level, and there are a couple of tight spaces, so it is recommended that the player stays focused so they do not die in this section. Following this is a quite easy, but at the same time somewhat tight mini robot segment. There are a few tight jumps in this section, which includes small jumps, full jumps, and some in the middle. There are also a few sphere timings. The level then ends with an easy small jump, followed by an actually somewhat difficult jump at 99%. The player has to jump over a quadruple spike, but there are also spikes hanging over top of the quadruple spike on either side. In order to pass this jump, the player has to jump late. They cannot jump early or small, or else they will end up getting killed by one of the spikes. It also has to be a maximum robot jump. This jump used to be nearly impossible, but Superion GD nerfed it to be easier. After the player completes the final jump, a nice end card is shown with the name of the level and all the people it is dedicated to. This level contains 3 user coins. The first coin is located at 25%. In order to get it, the player has to go below a wave structure at 12% and touch a torch located there. Then the player has to collect a skull located in the wave section at 23%. After that, the player can collect the coin at the end of the wave section. The second coin is at 74%. To get it, the second coin is at 74%. This coin is much more complicated than the first one. To get it, the player must collect 4 keys located throughout the level. After collecting these coins, the player has to jump and hold a hidden dash orb at 73% to get on an alternate path leading to the coin. The first key is at 57%. To get it, the player has to fly under the structure. The second key is at 62%. In order to get it, the player has to make a smaller jump to get on a platform below the main route. The third key is located at 65%. To get it, the player has to jump below the main path and do tight robot jumps. The fourth and final key is located at 66%. In order to get it, the player has to hold a hidden dash orb to go above the main route, then do robot timings before being able to collect the key. The third and final coin is located at 99%. In order to get it, the player first has to click an invisible orb at 53%, do some robot timings, then collect a skull located at 54%. After that, the player has to collect 2 hearts. If the player does these steps correctly, the coin should be automatically collected before the last jump at 99%. The first heart is located at 93%. In order to get it, the player has to fly close to a saw blade on top of the screen to collect it. The second heart is located at 97%. To get it, the player has to jump up and land on an invisible platform to get it. Eric Van Wilderman died at 84% at the boss fight. Juniper died at 88% at the boss fight. SRGUILLESTER died at 95%. Guitar Hero Styles died at 99% twice while verifying the level. Dorami died at 99% 15 times at the last jump. The password for this level is 240220. There used to be an insanely tight jump at 99%, but since then it has been nerfed to be easier. Dorami died at this jump a grand total of 15 times before it was nerfed. An American player, Juniper, did not die here once, which is considered surprising, since one of the things she is known for is dying at the end of long levels. For example, she died at 99% on Future Funk 2, 4 times 99%, and 97%, and 98% on Dark Travel, and 98% on Hypnotic Travel. If the player manages to die here, a death message pops up saying, here we go again, KKK. The first question mark will be upside down, while the second one will be right side up. It also has the words, really? 99%? WTF? Proud moment. And there is a word in red which reads, no! There used to be an animation of Guitar Hero Styles' icon at 51% of the level. But following his controversy, it was removed and replaced with the text ADVYOUT, which can be found in the editor. The dedication to and the text stating that Guitar Hero Styles is the verifier of the level has been removed from the end card after the final jump.